Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Public Sector Perspectives V2X Testing and Deployment Panel. My name is Mike Brown. I'm with Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas. I'll be moderating this session. We're very excited to have this session. Just a little bit about myself and Southwest Research. You know, at Southwest Research, we do kind of a wide variety of research and development activities and independent testing and evaluation. You know, my background is really, you know, over 20 years of working with public sector in V2X and intelligent transportation systems. You know, especially in this V2X area, we do a lot of R&D activities, deployment support, standards development, and independent test and evaluation. So we're very excited and happy member to be participating in OmniAir. I also serve, though, as the V2X Technical Working Group Chair for OmniAir. And as part of that role, you know, it's very fun because I get to interact with a lot of different organizations, and especially looking at, you know, what are we testing? How are we going to test it? We really focus a lot on, you know, what are the test cases? How do we need to test and vet this technology to make our end users confident in that? And but one of the things, as we were talking about potential panels for this Plug Fest and this workshop, we wanted to really kind of back up and get the perspectives of the public sector. It's very easy for a lot of the engineers like myself to get lost in the how and the shiny new technologies. But you know, when we back up, you know, why are we doing this? And especially from the infrastructure owner operators perspectives, you know, we want to save lives. We want to move people and goods more efficiently. So this topic in this panel, I'm really excited about, because this really helps us get our perspective and helps us with our strategic work in OmniAir and our technical working group as we go forward and make sure we're focused on the important aspects of why we're doing this. So we have an all-star panel put together today, and so I'm really excited about this. We have Alan Davis, who's an assistant state traffic engineer with the Georgia Department of Transportation. Julie Evans is joining us. She's a senior transportation engineer with RSandH. Nick Hegemier, who leads our RSU working group for OmniAir. He's the managing director of infrastructure for DriveOhio. And Jeff Dailey is the deputy executive director for the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. So we're really excited to have all the panelists here and the different perspectives involved. I have a ton of respect for everyone on this panel, and I'm just excited to be part of it. What we're going to do today is give a few minutes for each of the panelists to introduce themselves and what they're doing. So they each have some slides that will take, you know, 3 to 5 minutes to kind of introduce everybody to the deployment activities that they're involved with and get some of their perspectives. And then we're going to have just a general discussion on how we can help serve their needs long term and help shape our focus for OmniAir going forward. So extremely excited for this panel. Let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll start with Alan Davis from Georgia DOT. Alan, you want to share your slides?
Thanks, Mike. I think those have come up now. Very excited to be here with everybody and to share a little bit of our perspective and talk a little about the IOO perspective on connected vehicles. And just a quick background on me. And my role with the department is most of my time's focused in on our arterial management program in the state. So I think traffic signals and things other than interstates and their mobility. And somehow we've introduced a lot of these emerging technologies such as connected vehicles into our day-to-day aspect. And so I'll touch on that a little bit more, hopefully in our discussions today about the workforce challenges with agencies and connected vehicles. But just to dive right in and talk a little bit about where Georgia is with connected vehicles, I'll go through a quick timeline. We've been working on this for, about 3 to 4 years, and we got our introduction into the deployment world of connected vehicles back in around 2017 with the AASHTO SPAT Challenge, which was a an aggressive goal of deploying infrastructure in all 50 states at least 20 intersections to kind of tackle this chicken and egg philosophy of connectivity and infrastructure, of deploying technology, seeing it in action, getting agencies familiar with it and comfortable with it. And that's very much what we did. We had a 54 intersection pilot project where we went through the systems engineering process, deployed our first RSUs in the field, and got a good feel and understanding of how these things worked, how they interacted with our infrastructure, and what we needed to do as an agency to be able to support it, to understand it, and get an understanding of where our role with it would be. I think something interesting about this project for us is really two different things. One, it's from the initiation of the project. I'm talking back from a procurement perspective to the day we flipped, quote unquote, flipped the first switch on our first RSU, was about 9 months. That's fairly quick for a DOT project. I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure of working with us on some of our more construction projects, but those orange cones and barrels can be up for a while, right? But that just gives credence to the way this technology can move and how agencies can scale to get these things up and running. And also, we focused on a traffic signal perspective in our deployment. And since it was the AstroSpat challenge, and that's where our focus area was, and the actual cost for a traffic signal is around $250,000. The cost that we were seeing for the full deployment and integration of these things at an intersection was right around $4,000 an intersection. That's devices, that's configuration, licensing, installation, testing, the full gamut. And even now, as we add in new features and technologies, it's still around a $6,000 or $7,000 an intersection range. So although that's not cheap in the framework of a DOT agency, that's relatively low cost to be able to enable infrastructure for this. Moving forward, we were successful in that pilot. We stood up several different signal hazing and timing and map-based applications. We wanted to expand on that success. We designed something that we could scale up, and so we did. And so we targeted a 1,600 intersection deployment throughout the Metro Atlanta region. That's what we're undertaking right now throughout the region. After that, we had some influx and support from US DOT through an ATC MTD grant. Through that partnership, we're able to really fund and substantiate that deployment throughout the region. And that brings us, somewhere in there was an FCC proposed rulemaking that really made us rethink things and rebalance, recalibrate. But in 2020, we launched another regional effort. We're very fortunate right now to have 2 regional efforts going on in Metro Atlanta for deployments of roadside infrastructure. And so we just went through a procurement for another regional procurement that's geared towards our local agency partners of continuing forward this equipping infrastructure to support various safety and mobility applications through the connected vehicle world. And that's really our vision and goal, is to have this baseline infrastructure, this ecosystem, if you will, that supports a host of different applications centered around safety and mobility using the safety spectrum. That's our goal, that's our vision, and that's what we're now realizing to see, is that we have this whole network of devices out there that are able to contextually apply different use cases as agencies or jurisdictions or regional or statewide efforts dictate. Everybody likes to see a good map of where we are right now. So to date, we have over 500 RSUs actually licensed and installed. Most of those are all DSRC, either broadcasting on the full spectrum, all channels, or more recently, we've been licensing those under channel 180 as the current regulatory framework allows. I'll mention too, the array on I-85 is another effort we have in the western part of the state of Georgia, where we have 6 dual mode RSUs deployed, both DSRC and CV2X, operating and functional on CV2X currently right now. That's a very interesting project where we're demonstrating a lot of freeway-based applications, queue warning, crash alerts, weather alerts, those types of things, and really getting our feet wet in the data analytics side of it with our partners with the Ray and Panasonic. And then we have another 454 RSUs installed and ready, that are being installed and licensed as we speak. And so all the future deployments as well will embrace both DSRC and CVDX as the market needs to move forward. Within all that, we've also been focusing not just on broadening out this deployment of infrastructure, but looking at very specific applications, looking at emergency vehicle preemption, transit signal priority, some freight application pilots, things like that. And it's really geared around, while the spectrum is available and while we're deployment, we're going to use it to take care of our own public sector fleet type applications, and making sure we're making use of it to enhance the safety and mobility of our folks until the market and automakers implement the technology. And I'll just real quickly reference this, our current deployment of this regional connected vehicle program. This is our most recent effort that was both DSRC and V2X. It was very interesting in its deployment in that we were a broker for local agencies in the contracting side of things and the financial side of things as manage it. We didn't have a financial stake in it, but it's all local money and federal aid going into this. And that relationship really helps us to promote interoperability throughout the region and address standardization and type things. And interestingly enough, we actually required OmniAir certification for hardware, which was a challenge on V2X because it didn't quite exist at the time, but we worked around it. But that was a big help for us, I think, in our procurement, which I believe we'll talk a bit more about today. And with that, I'll hand it off.
Jeff, you're on mute.
I had a good start. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. All right. I was saying thank you, Mike, and good presentation, Alan. I'm Jeff Dailey, Deputy Executive Director of the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. It's always a mouthful, but I'm going to give you a little brief overview about, from a toll road perspective, how we're handling this emerging technology, V2X, and how we're trying to navigate the V2X technology puzzle. And then this change, we all know, is going to be major disruption. From a toll standpoint, you got third-party payment app systems that'll open up a whole series of realm of opportunities for different third-party payment providers. Road user charging is really right around the bend. Connected vehicle technology, with safety applications and traveler information. And then the semi-autonomous vehicles. And so there's a lot going from a toll road perspective. A little bit about us, we're a new agency in Central Texas. We have Austin, but it's really 2-county regional toll agency set up so we could respond to the regional needs. And we work in concert with the city of Austin. You heard Jason, John, Michael. We've got a lot of good teaming efforts going between City of Austin and the Texas Department of Transportation and how we're going to be, developing test plans going forward with this. We outsource a lot of actually all of our major services. It's really a core staff that we work with. We're pretty flexible, and we try to be, pretty aggressive as far as dealing with innovations and new technology. A little bit about our how we've evolved. Again, we started in 2002, but our first road opened in 2007. Always tried to make sure we have the foundation, the fiber optic communication system in. We've installed the ITS that everybody else does, dynamic message signs. With our express lane, MOPAC express lane, we have one dynamically priced express lane in the region, single lane. It opened in 2016, but we installed Bluetooth readers, and then we have the Wavetronic sensors, traffic management center along with it. And then, in 2018, we established a innovation team and approach. And then we launched our technology plan this year after doing a significant amount of research. So interestingly, we're having some operational problems with the MOPAC express lane. It was wildly successful. People loved it. They could have a reliable travel time, but we're trying to figure out ways that people can make better choices on there. And we were going to do a typical approach of putting additional traffic, traveler information signs, price signs, different things that could alert people as far as events up the road. And we're looking at about a $10 million price tag. So we sat back and tried to get some user input and had some focus groups. And what they told us was, you know, they don't really rely on those dynamic message signs and that information. They don't really trust it as much as the, you know, what's on your mobile phone and all that. So we decided to step back and let's focus on the new emerging technology, the promise of connected vehicles. So that's what our approach is. And that's just one example. I mean, right off the bat, we could have spent $10 million and probably not had what people wanted. So we decided to hold back and really start focusing on this new technology. You know, and we have a technology plan that focuses on regional interoperability. Most regions, you have a great coordination when it comes to divvying up the money at the MPO level and then also responding to incidents. But then there's like a donut hole in the middle where people, the regions are just, there's not a lot of coordination around day-to-day planning and operations. There's a few in our country that do that. You're talking about the transportation systems management and operations. But everybody's talking technology, but in reality, most areas really don't only have a handful of technology people. And so what we're trying to do is share information, tee up our data, and try to put more resources in the region so we can do a better job of preparing for the future. Then as far as the connected vehicles, we've been installing some wrong-way driver technology, a TAPCO system, and we want to install some fixed cameras. You know that George has been doing that for instant detection. And then also using connected vehicle information so we can communicate information both to the responders as well as the traveling public. Next generation tolling, let's test that out and roll that potentially as soon as possible because it gives more options for our customers out there. And then establishing our system as a test bed for new technologies. And one of the things I want to talk about, and some of you may have heard of Waycare. We procured a service called Waycare in places like Las Vegas and Columbus, Ohio, and down in Tampa. This is basically a software as a service that takes in connected vehicle information, uses artificial intelligence, and uses that as a way to detect incidents or traveler information aspects. And then we communicate that back out to social media or these other new services that are, you know, like SiriusXM and all that. But so we've contracted with them to help us develop that technology in conjunction with installing some roadside units, both Capsch and Siemens, both of which have been certified by OmniAir. And we're going to develop tolling and connected vehicle information. The tolling, again, we've got an arrangement with Capsch and Ford. Katie Herbick had spoke to this yesterday on 2 of our roadways and testing how the toll system would alert. How would it tell people what the toll's coming up and how it would register in the system, as well as how we communicate traveler information. And then the same thing with Siemens. We've got testing programs that are underway for that. So that is the basic of the lay of land. What we really try to do is focus on what, with an eye to the future, but what can we deliver now? We really believe that this tolling and connected vehicle traveler information technology is something that could be mainstream within the next 5 years. With that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Really exciting stuff. Let's move on to Julie Evans with RSandH.
Good morning, y'all. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, good morning. Yeah, I am Julie Evans with RSandH. I am not an infrastructure owner operator, but I've been working with public sector clients for the best part of a decade in V2X deployment and testing. I'm really excited to speak with this panel because I think expanding the PlugFest to host these conversations is really going to start filling some of the needs we have for these ongoing conversations. We have lots of kind of industry events, but in this format, we've always been focused on kind of steering and harmonizing our development efforts. And I think that's really valuable on the technical side. And I see a lot of gaps that can be filled in the same way from the policy side. So I think COVID has, upended a lot of our business, not necessarily bring it to a halt because everyone's still moving, but giving us a good opportunity to kind of check some of the assumptions in our development approach. So my background, straddling engineering and policy, I got started at the Saxon lab with connected vehicles. We built out the initial prototypes, standards, and architectures needed to give IOOs the confidence to invest in this technology. And where we started there, retrofitting staff access roads, cobbling together, a reference implementation architecture. This was really what every new IOO is still doing. We have a lot of, really exciting success stories in, Georgia and Ohio and others that are serving as a really useful model, but there is still a big gap between, as Jeff said, there are a bunch of people who just don't have enough staff or, ability to support this work. So looking back to the first Plugfest, we had finished safety pilot model deployment and updated the spec to kind of harden the devices and build confidence that IOOs could invest in these and they weren't going to, turn over too quickly, and really put the focus on interoperability. But the other thing we did here was start building technical literacy amongst a larger group. So, several years later, the deployment footprint has expanded dramatically, and you have, operational deployments in most states. While the technical literacy has, increased with that, and we've brought a much larger group of people to the table, which is a huge step forward in the right direction. The tech transfer is still somewhat limited. These are not plug and play devices. This is not, a COTS system. And so, while you have a lot of agencies that have accelerated into mature deployments where they're, have multiple applications and they're ready to do performance monitoring, you also have people who are still trying to get the individual kind of device integration process under their belts. And so we work with state and local agencies all over the country to do kind of a readiness assessment, figuring out, do you have the back end resources? Are you prepared to expand that? What does your cybersecurity approach look like? And really answering kind of those fundamental questions that we started out, with Federal Highway at the lab and helping bring more folks to the table. But I think as we move forward and look to, how do we kind of nationalize the maturity that so many individual states, and deployments have seen, is that we have to use this conversation space to look a little bit more into long-term funding strategies. I think Jeff mentioned, all of these kind of private sector partners. There is a huge amount of money being spent, but also available in this sector because of the hype of automated vehicles. And that offers an opportunity for the public sector that we haven't helped them build a business model for. I remember at the lab, this chicken and egg problem has been going on for a long time. And the idea was, how are we going to get this out first? Are we going to get it in the cars, or are we going to get it on the roadside? What does the business model look like for these DSRC manufacturers to sell this equipment? And so Federal Highway kind of subsidized that and encouraged it so that we could get off the ground. And now we need to be doing the same thing, helping the states build the business model for getting private sector money to come to them instead of kind of externalizing all of this to their business model where, again, we have really good success stories, but we also have agencies that just don't know how to bring those partners on board, who don't know how to facilitate access to their back end, to the private sector. And so I'm excited that this format is evolving to include this conversation. I hope we, can have ongoing kind of more focused discussions about, the funding side, the cybersecurity side. I think there's been a lot of progress in data sharing and, the consortiums that we need to provide not just access, but visibility into what do the data structures look like. So I think we've come a really long way. And I think this is a good opportunity to look at, not just having a market-driven deployment focus, but a needs-driven deployment focus that really does meet the needs of the public sector and not just kind of push them to adopt the technology that we have.
That's great. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, very exciting. Exactly why we're here is to focus more on the needs. So last but not least, let's go to Nick Hegemier with DriveOhio.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let me get my slides up here. I'm Nick Hegemier with DriveOhio, Managing Director of Infrastructure. Have 18 years of ITS experience with the Ohio Department of Transportation. DriveOhio is an initiative of the Department of Transportation. So we are housed and we are, fully funded through the DOT. In 2018, the beginning of 2018, DriveOhio was formed to be the center of connected and automated vehicles for the state, sort of that one-stop shop. And since then, and probably leading up, the previous, 1.5 years up to then, we had started focusing on connected and automated vehicles as well. You can see that there's a lot of activity within Ohio, starting up in the northeast part of the state, with our lake effect corridor, focusing on weather and variable speed limit signs, down through the Ohio Turnpike, who had initially deployed some DSRC technology, and now they're working on transitioning over to cellular V2X, working with, some OEMs up in that area. And then, we focus also in the air and ground, technology. So our UAS, our unmanned aircraft systems, is part of DriveOhio as well. Really looking at the complete ecosystem, both on the air or on the ground and in the air. So you can see, we've won a few ADS and a few ATC MTD grants. I'm going to focus today on the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. That corridor is 35 miles in length, and it leads you from the Transportation Research Center, which is at the northwest end of the corridor, all the way down to Dublin. And Dublin is that connector where we, can start integrating into the City of Columbus Smart City Grant applications as well. Along that 35-mile section of roadway, we're deploying 63 roadside units. So those are already installed. We're waiting on some FCC licensing, and then we're going to start testing and turning them on. As well as, what we're doing with the industry partners along the stretch. So we've deployed 20 locations with Bosch video analytic cameras, looking at applications such as wrong way driving, queue warning, and, just doing some general traffic counts. And then, we've also had some deployments with Nexar, looking at, their capabilities, as well as MH Corbin with their Connect ITS device, looking at how we do the data aggregation on the edge, and then turn that into a connected vehicle messaging, a V2X messaging, to the RSU along that corridor. Also, as well, along the corridor, we're deploying, I'd say, 4 applications in addition to the ones I've already mentioned with our private partners. Those 4 applications are curve speed warning and reduced speed lane closure warning on 33. And then as we transition off to Marysville and Dublin, Marysville sits about the midway point along the corridor, and Dublin sits along the southeast end of the corridor. We're also looking at pedestrian crossing warning and looking at most predominantly those mid-block crossings. And then red light violation warning, looking at the SPAT messaging and transitioning that into a red light violation warning type of message for the motorists. In Marysville, all 27 signals have been outfitted with RSUs. So it's really like the first city. It's a smaller city that has all of its infrastructure ready to go for the V2X technology. And then in Dublin, there's 10 to 15 RSUs deployed there. The next steps for the corridor are the OBU phases. Honda is participating in that phase. They've currently deployed around 120 onboard units navigating up and down the corridor, with up to a total of 200 coming by the end of next year. We've recently announced and the RFP is now off the street, a connected Marysville OBU project focusing on up to 400 private citizen vehicles, getting the private citizens involved, as well as what it's going to take to develop the maintenance and sustainability of those onboard units, and looking at, what are the benefits when we start deploying up to 10% of this vehicle saturation in an area. The next thing that will be released is our OBU integrator project. That is going to focus on up to 400 government fleet vehicles, and really focusing on getting the RSU integrator project with those applications built into the vehicles, the government fleet vehicles, so we can, get that thousand vehicle number, looking at that 10%, because there's about 23,000 people in Marysville, 11,000 vehicles. We're roughly right underneath that, 10% saturation, where they say most you'll see the safety benefits occurring at. As far as the air side, we are doing some research on the air side there, a $5 million unmanned traffic management research project. Initially looking at, how do we manage the lower altitude airspace? And then the next phase is also incorporating, air to ground vehicle transportation infrastructure kind of communication. So how do we use detectors on the unmanned aircraft to detect anomalies on the ground transportation network and report those back to the infrastructure side of things, so that, vehicles can take advantage and motorists can take advantage of that information. I'll turn this back over to Mike, and I'll be looking forward to the questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. That's fascinating just to see everything you're doing as part of that deployment, especially with the air side of it. That brings a whole nother, truly brings another dimension to what we're doing. So I'm excited for the discussion. One thing I will say, for any of the audience members that would like to pose any questions, you can please just post them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. I've got a few, though, to start us off and kind of get the discussion rolling, and I can't wait to kind of hear how the discussion goes. I guess just keeping going with what you said, Nick, in that presentation and the complexity of the various applications and everything you're doing, one thing we want to do is kind of understand, why is OmniAir and certification important, and what role does it play in this landscape? What does OmniAir certification mean to you, and why is it important to an IOO?
So, yeah, thanks for the great question. I think, as we talk about interoperability across the nation, we've had a lot of conversations about that have dealt with, communication from various members, especially of the CV pooled fund, that may travel to get to the meetings, and they're traveling with their onboard unit devices in their vehicles, and they're driving through these intersections that have been, equipped with the V2X technology, and their system works great in their own domain. But as they travel outside of that locality and they travel through other areas, they're not getting the benefits of some of the messaging and some of the value of that technology. And that's done for numerous reasons. And one of those is the technology may not be compatible with each other. You may have different vendors that are deployed that may be broadcasting messages in a different way. And I think the important steps that OmniAir is taking is sort of defining, okay, these are the vendors that are known to interoperate with each other, and they've been tested to a certain degree. And, we feel comfortable that, it may not work straight out of the box, but you're closer to the winning stage than you are if you choose another device.
Yeah, good point. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think Julie had a great point about how none of these things are commercial off the shelf, right? And Nick touched on this as well too. And so we agencies need something to ground us with some assurance that what we're getting is, not just Joe's radio that he made in his garage, and that interoperability plays off. So I think OmniAir is positioned well to speak to that and to lead that. And we appreciate that level of technical input from an agency's perspective, because to be frank, we're just not, speaking for Georgia, we're not well built for that level of technical input. We touch so many different things. Even my world of traffic operations, the number of devices and technologies we have to deal with are already complex. And so adding in the this extraordinary level of complexity within the connected vehicle world is a huge challenge for us, and it's not a capacity that we're going to quickly build. And so we lean heavily on these standards bodies to help us in that, and to help us make good decisions, make good investments with tax dollars to move forward.
Yeah, I think the certified and the compliant labels do promote trust within this industry. When we updated the 4th generation spec, it was to say, okay, the hardware needs to be done, vendors. Everything else you're going to do really needs to be software if you want anyone to buy these. But at that point, we thought that the biggest obstacle was going to be buying the devices. And Alan and John Hibbert has said this kind of on the conference circuit as well. That's really not the pain point from a cost standpoint. The development and the integration is huge, and what I see as a contractor is that that's where most of the money is being spent on contractors, is this externalized development where, so much of the integration of these deployments is identically repeatable. And I think that OmniAir is well positioned not just to continue supporting the interoperability testing, but other deployment support, like the SPAT map message building tools that the feds put out was low production value. They do, just like they couldn't fund testing, they can't fund this, and that we can start aggregating some of this guidance that's a little bit more technical and hands-on, like, for states that are just getting started, or for a locality that's just getting started, what does the FCC licensing process look like? That should be fully visible. The SCMS enrollment and kind of the comparison of vendors, there's not a life cycle visibility to IOOs who are getting started. And so while their procurement people still see, buying these devices as a big challenge, truthfully, the technical challenges are just as navigable as the procurement. And I think we can see some of this guidance and best practice consolidated in a place where, IOOs and their contractors don't have to duplicate, hour for hour what everyone else has already done.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead, Jeff.
Mike, I didn't know if you want me to go ahead and weigh in real quick on that or not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say that we're new into this in Central Texas, and just like Alan said, that we're relying on a third party. We think OmniAir plays that role. It sets kind of levels a playing field, gives you a level of trust and confidence. And we haven't had much of an issue so far. We're starting out small. We've got about 10 right now that are out there, RSUs, and starting to doing our tests. But we've reached out a lot to like Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority and others. You probably heard Bob Fry talk a lot about they spent a lot of time trying to get all the equipment working right because it didn't come with user manuals and things like that. So it's important. We look at that as an important step. We are going to scale up based on our testing. We do plan on scaling up pretty big based upon the outcome.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think making a centralized repository of the certified device documentation would be helpful, just because what I've seen is that they'll print something in a user manual that, is accidentally incorrect, the wrong, default IP address or something. And if they're going to correct it with one agency, then, it would be useful if that gets updated for everyone so that not everyone's team of engineers has to realize that, the default IP was printed incorrectly.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. This is an interesting
Mike.
aspect about.
One other thing that I wanted to mention was, with the OmniAir and the communication to the IOOs, there's been a lot of miscommunication as to what OmniAir is actually testing. So with the next releases and future releases, we're going to be actually publishing, release 1 is out there right now for DSRC. There'll be a release coming for C-V2X. As that technology and those test cases are developed further, there'll be additional releases that sort of spell out, okay, this is what an IOO can expect to have interoperability with and sort of uniformity with as far as an RSU, an OBU, things of that nature.
Yeah, that'll be great, Nick. I think that'll really kind of help demystify it a little bit for the IOOs and what is certification and what does OmniAir certification mean. as you all were talking though, I was thinking about just, you talked about some of the pain points. And I guess, Alan, maybe to you, the sheer number of RSUs that you're deploying is really impressive. And interoperability is key to that. What are some of the pain points that you're experiencing with interoperability of some of these devices, and how could this certification testing help?
Well, I will say that we've been successful. I'll just add this, and this is not a choreographed plug, but our private partners in deploying this have been essential. We would not be able to do it without the technical resources of the consultants and contractors we work with. One of them being your organization, Mike, Southwest Research, have been paramount in us being successful. I think that is going to be a consistent thing for DOTs across the board of pain points that can be overcome with technical resources and help like that. But really, I think the biggest issue we've had of late and what we've seen with our local partners is just uncertainty of what the fate of the spectrum is, what the fate of devices are, what's this new technology, what about that next one, especially just even the introduction of V2X into the discussion points, the talking points of procurement decisions that our partners are having to make. We really rely on, as we said earlier, this some standards body, some sort of testing certification to build that trust that what we're doing is of value, it has importance, and helps guide us, because we agencies will respond to market and regulatory trends for the most part. If all of a sudden every car maker is saying they're going to put in, windmills to broadcast basic safety messages, well, we're going to accommodate that because the technology is that is that valuable. The outcomes of what this technology can do is that substantial. So that's been a bit of a pain point for us. We use the term muddy water a lot because there's a lot of bad information out there. Things get confused, and just that lack of technical breadth that's needed to understand this level of technology. That's been a huge challenge for us. And so I think organizations like OmniAir can step forward with confidence to IOOs and say, you can move forward with this with confidence, knowing that it's going to work, it's going to be of value, it's going to deliver your outcomes that you're trying to do.
That's good. Anyone else have anything on pain points and how certification can help?
I think one of the aspects of interoperability that, it's outside of the technical realm, but it really affects the technical interoperability is, how different these deployment environments are. I mean, it's not state by state, it's region by region, it's really road by road that you have, dramatically different operating environments. Waymo's, capitalizing on that, out in Arizona because they have this uniquely, hospitable environment for AVs, but then you have, I-70 on Colorado, out in Colorado, where you've got geometric, operational, and weather challenges that are, very unique, and then result in, operational, traffic patterns that are also unique. And so, providing as much visibility into the use cases and the development of those kind of workarounds for, whether it's, what we used to end up having to do was like, extending your range where you have really low visibility with, point-to-point radios, and some of those, like this is not, one RSU for every signalized intersection across the country. The deployments are custom. The site selection has to be heavily customized in order to be successful. And I think that provision alone is underrepresented in the development marketing, that, site selection and planning is, among the most important success factors in your deployment process. If you choose, a site that's not conducive to your intended functionality, then, it's a huge waste of not just money, but time and effort. And I think that, to Nick's point about, whether you're driving, between regions and your device still works, largely is, a function of whether or not you're prepared to receive and send messages in the right way. But the reason that those get customized and catered, tailored, are to cater to unique operational environments. And we don't document that enough. We don't, I think, talk about kind of the site variability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to add in real quick here. Just again, I think it goes to, all these devices are going to be out there, and how do you manage them from an operational or maintenance standpoint? You can't all go with one. I mean, as an operator, you can't go all as one manufacturer. You got to have a mix and match. So making sure that they're interoperable, having application management and application systems, I think at some level of certification there, as well as the user aspects, the user information that comes out of that. And then there's blockchain. How does that fit into that with total information and travel information? So
yeah, and just to add a little bit, when we talk about pain points, we're not in this alone. Each deployment is not doing this as a unique kind of install. So some of the things that we're doing in Ohio is really focused around partnership, partnership with the industry, partnership with our other localities. We've started to develop a what we call the ITS knowledge base, where we'll start, sharing all of the system engineering documentation for each project that's deployed on an ITS and AVCV, scale. And then, the lessons learned as the project's completing that documentation to share the lessons learned, so people aren't just repeating and learning the same lessons and recreating the wheel every time they deploy something. And then as we talk about, on a national scale, really, the advent of the pooled funds, the CV pooled fund, the AV pooled fund, utilizing those capabilities to share the lessons learned across state boundaries is also beneficial. And getting industry participation in those pooled funds is definitely a key. Yeah,
that's been crucial. Being able to share information across all the folks that are actually getting it done is really crucial. We'll go to the audience questions maybe here in a little bit. But I had one other one maybe before we jump to the audience questions. And Jeff, you had talked a little bit about in your presentation that I thought was intriguing, and I've heard a number of people mention this in your comments a little bit, and I'd like to maybe dig into it a bit. But you talked about the trust and how these emerging technologies can maybe help with trust, and the trust of just people believing their phones over the variable message signs that were out there, and we're, as we think about kind of the trust, maybe that certification could help, and especially this relationship between the infrastructure owner operators and the auto OEMs. Is there an opportunity for certification and certified equipment and applications to really kind of help improve the trust for that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the way to standardize the information, how it's communicated and processed, so that the people, our users, see, actual real-time accurate information. That's important, because right now a lot of people view the dynamic message signs as not being really up to date, and I think some regions do a great job and others don't. I've seen a lot of them out there, but that's why they're relying on their phones. Their phones and their cars can give them real-time, starting to give you real-time location information. So having OmniAir help to set standards and testing, that raises that level of assurance that you're getting the right information. So I think it does have a big role to play, even more so than, I mean, the future's bright, right? It's wide open spaces out there for OmniAir, what it can do. It's the Wild West right now, really.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything on trust?
Alan, you're on mute.
Thank you. Nick, Jeff, you guys probably really attest to this, of being early deployers, early adopters of a lot of this technology often means you get invited to a lot of different working groups and standards bodies and things like that. And I think over the past couple of years, our participation in conversation with OEMs has been new to us. It's something we have not been at the same table for in the past, which is remarkable, since we build the roads and they build the cars that drive on them. So now we have this convergence of technology with OEMs moving forward. And the more I participate in these meetings, the more in these conversations, the more I hear there's a lot of distrust from automakers for government agencies like us to be able to reliably provide information from infrastructure, which is what's needed for many of the things we're looking at here from a V2X perspective. And so I think when we're very good at getting a checklist and checking boxes when we do a deployment or a procurement or something like that to say, look, we get a gold star next to our deployment because we met this standard, and our data came back and looked like this in this testing device. And so the more and more we have industry accepted standards, industry accepted testing parameters, and things we agree on from an applications perspective of, no, I just need 2 seconds, don't give me 3, or you're only giving me 1, which is a surprisingly common conversation point. That makes a big difference for us. It better fits how agencies typically operate from the IOO side and what we're good at. And hopefully I think I can continue to broker trust of we're making the effort to check these boxes. And so I think there's a real potential there.
Yeah. I'd like to maybe, we've got a little less than 10 minutes left. I want to take a couple of these audience questions. I'd love to have the audience participation. We got a question from Suzanne Sloan, question for Nick about benefits. Is the Marysville area seeing benefits? How are the benefits being measured and evaluated?
So thank you for the question, Suzanne. The vision is for the consultant team to really perform this measurement, looking at a before and after type of operations at the intersections and at the crosswalks. We're trying to identify where and what benefits have been realized. I see that as being more of a, the consultant team kind of helping us identify what benefits are achievable, what benefits are, what's the low-hanging fruit, for the applications that we're deploying within Marysville. And, that's where we're kind of headed. We're really looking for, those more in-depth research teams that have the experience with the V2X technology to kind of provide that guiding path for us.
We really struggled with that with the AASHTO connected vehicle cost benefit analysis a long time ago, in that a lot of contractors, are very resistant to share the cost data, which is, kind of part of evaluating not necessarily the benefits, but the return on investment. And I think in this space, we have to remember that we are operating on public right of way, and we therefore have an obligation to be trying to minimize, the marginal cost to the user. And while, the development is slow and sometimes a little bit rocky because it's led by the public sector, like Alan said, they are very good at certain types of development, and keeping this in their domain and establishing the partnerships with the private sector, I think, is an important aspect of that. To Nick's point, I think the private sector taking up the mantle of, creating the visualizations that we need to see the benefits. On that deployment slide that we had, you have hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, and we don't have faster, safer roads, 5 years later because we have V2X technology out on the roadway. But what we have are smarter DOTs who are anticipating how to expand these applications and use cases to deliver. As Alan said, this is still early adoption. The footprint is a little bit more mature and much bigger, but the performance is not being measured. It's not, we're just not really there yet either.
Yeah, and one thing that I could add on to that is the fact that, as we deploy this technology, we're deploying it in a foundational way that we can layer a bunch of technology on top of it. And the technology that we are deploying is giving us data that we can then improve operations on. So if you want turning count movements, we're deploying, video analytic cameras, that can provide that information to make the signal timing better. Maybe the signals aren't supposed to run in free, but that's the way that they currently are operating in Marysville right now. Maybe there's a better signal timing plan that can be deployed, utilizing all the video and the RSU technology.
Yeah, and our approach is really focused on two main use cases. That's going to be instant response and clearance. And then the other one, traveler information providing trip reliability. So the incident response one is clear. When you have automated incident detection systems, whether it be using connected vehicle technology or video technology, you can save about 10 million minutes off of the congestion just by clearing it quicker. The other one is going to be, we got to develop that, but we're thinking trip reliability. People are going to make better decisions if they get real-time, location-specific information. So that's what we're focusing on right now. And then the toll application aspect.
Yeah, good stuff. So one of the other questions that came in the chat is an interesting aspect that we hadn't talked about. Selma Coben asks, what about maritime small ports? Are any of you all doing anything with ports that might be included in here?
So we just kicked off an effort with our Georgia Port Authority down in Savannah, Georgia, which came from our commissioner and their commissioner talking back and forth and said, you guys should do something with connected vehicles. And so it was handed to us, go do something with connected vehicles. So we worked together to come up with some use cases and ideas, and it's largely off the port property that we're working with this, and it largely is dealing with ingress and egress of trucks into their facility. It's a huge problem with Savannah being the #4 port container in terms of container volume in the country. Huge influx of goods and cargo in there. And so working on better ways to inform drivers in and out of that port facility, use this gate instead of that gate. This at grade rail crossing is blocked, go around it. Some very practical things, but just that dissemination of information to our freight providers has been something we're looking at. And again, that's off the port proper, but definitely supporting the operations there from our agency's perspective.
Yeah, the use case kind of approaching the port, the data ownership, as drayage kind of approaches those ports, you have this kind of distributed business model that is not very transparent. And so what we've seen in several different ports in different parts of the country, and trying to do connected vehicle pilots, they can get, the infrastructure up to show that connected vehicle works in that location, but it's not being customized to really benefit, the wait times, and it's being shown as a demonstration of CV technology, but not really CV technology for maritime for ports, because I think the agencies, again, are kind of still getting up to speed on the technical literacy of how this stuff works. What data do they need in order to make a port, like, for example, drayage wait time reduction application functional? So there's a lot of potential there, but it has been kind of grueling.
Yeah, it's a very interesting aspect. So we had another question come in. We have time for one more. M. Wells has a question. While the FCC is considering spectrum allocation, are any of the panelists providing FCC input? If so, is your preference DSRC, V2X, or both? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
So I can take a shot at it. Or Alan, you want to go first?
You go ahead, Nick.
Okay, so yes, we've definitely provided comments to the notice proposed rulemaking, and for the US 33 corridor, we have submitted a waiver request to be able to utilize the lower channels, try to get by that freeze on the FCC has implemented. And I think as far as a preference, I think the Alliance for Automotive Innovation has set out a decent plan for utilizing the lower spectrum for DSRC, the upper spectrum for CV2X. Then the middle you can kind of have a mishmash, and then looking and see which technology becomes prevalent over the next 5 years, and then making a decision and a phased out approach of the losing technology, or the technology that doesn't necessarily perform as good as the other.
Yep.
I'll add real quick too that our Director of Operations, John Hibbert, has been very active with ITS America and the FCC in informing from a IO perspective. But largely, we try to remain technology neutral and respond to where the market or regulatory framework goes. We've adjusted all of our DSRC filings to channel 180 to just get them approved so we can use them now. And in terms of preference, officially we're agnostic, but we've got a bunch of DSRC out there, so I'd rather not lose that investment.
Well, that and the communication, they're different tools. I mean, you have to have, low latency for safety critical applications. This is an ecosystem where we need a hybrid approach of lots of different types of communication technologies. Like, in some places you have a cellular backhaul because you don't have fiber. You wouldn't, pick one. You need both. You'd like to keep all of your resources on hand. And it's not, to say that one is better than the other empirically. It's that, depends on where you are and what you're doing.
Exactly. That's a safe bet. Well, we're out of time, so I really want to thank all of our panelists. It's been a wonderful discussion. Really appreciate all the questions from the audience too. And I hope everyone stays tuned for the fireside chat with Suzanne Murtha, and she'll lead that fireside chat with Yaitlin Wong from Stantec. So please stay tuned for that. And thanks everybody. Thanks to our panelists for participating. Wonderful discussion.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.